The film begins with an 85-year-old grandmother named Pilar, living in Madrid, Spain. She is sitting in a cafe when she notices something strange. Time on her watch stops just before 8 o'clock. After this, Pilar goes to an apartment where she finds the lifeless body of another elderly woman lying on the floor, along with a birthday cake and a photo of a woman in a drawer surrounded by hair. However, Pilar appears unfazed by the sight. Behind her, a naked blonde woman is standing and hands her a matryoshka doll. Pilar looks delighted, kneeling down and kissing the woman. The scene shifts to Susanna, a professional model who has been working in Paris for 6 years. Susanna is Pilar's granddaughter. Since childhood, Susanna was raised by Pilar after her parents passed away. Every few months, Susanna returns to Madrid to visit her grandmother. After finishing a photo shoot, Susanna calls Pilar, but her grandmother doesn't answer. Susanna leaves a voicemail saying she won't be able to return to Madrid to celebrate their shared birthday on March 22nd, as she has an important work commitment. That evening, Susanna relaxes at a club frequented by models and their agents. She and some friends enter a private room to take some powdered drugs. Shortly afterward, Susanna receives a call from St. Gabriel Hospital in Madrid, informing her that her grandmother Pilar has been hospitalized following an accident. Although Pilar is now stable, she is still unconscious. As Pilar's only living relative, Susanna is asked to come see her. Without delay, Susanna flies to Madrid the next day. While sleeping on the plane, she dreams of her childhood, recalling a moment when she saw Pilar laughing with other elderly women who were naked. Upon landing in Madrid, Susanna goes directly to St. Gabriel Hospital. The doctor explains that a neighbor had found Pilar collapsed at her home a few days earlier as the front door was open. Pilar had suffered a brain hemorrhage caused by a ruptured blood vessel, which damaged her brain tissue. As a result, Pilar will face difficulties with daily activities, and her motor and speech abilities have declined. It's even possible that Pilar may not recognize Susanna. The doctor emphasizes that Susanna's help is crucial, as there are no other relatives who can assist. Since Susanna's parents died in a car accident when she was a child, the doctor suggests moving Pilar to a nursing home recommended by the hospital, where she can receive proper care. However, Susanna decides to bring her beloved grandmother home and plans to hire someone to help care for her instead. Susanna brought her grandmother back to Pilar's apartment. Because the electricity was out, Susanna opened all the windows. She noticed dead plants and a bird cage with no bird in it. Suddenly, she saw Pilar standing up from her wheelchair, staring intently at a large painting of herself when she was younger. For the time being, Susanna decided to stay in the apartment to take care of her grandmother, who remained silent and distant. Since the bathroom mirror was fixed to the wall, Susanna bought a small handheld mirror for herself. While there, she noticed a photo of her own face in a perfume advertisement displayed around the area. That evening, Susanna received a call from her boss, Elvira, who asked about her situation. Elvira informed her that the modeling job Susanna was supposed to take had been reassigned to another model named Zoe. Later, Susanna fed Pilar some avocado, but Pilar suddenly choked on it. Susanna quickly helped her dislodge the food. After laying Pilar on the bed, Susanna hugged and kissed her beloved grandmother. While applying her nighttime skincare routine, Susanna noticed a strand of her hair had turned grey. Not long after, Pilar screamed in fear from her room, even soiling the bed out of distress. Susanna bathed Pilar and then laid her back down. Determined to provide better care, Susanna watched tutorial videos on how to care for the elderly, including using waterproof sheets, cleaning sensitive areas with special creams, and fitting diapers. After tending to Pilar, Susanna idly checked Zoe's Instagram account. When she finally fell asleep, she dreamed of someone entering her room. It turned out to be Pilar, who was completely naked. In the dream, Pilar slowly pulled down Susanna's pants and put her fingers into Susanna's mouth. But it was all just a nightmare. The next morning, Susanna fed Pilar again. Pilar laughed inexplicably while watching the news on TV. Her laughter persisted to the point that she couldn't eat, so Susanna turned off the TV to help Pilar focus. However, Pilar continued laughing, and Susanna assumed it might be a side effect of the brain hemorrhage. While putting away food in the kitchen, Susanna noticed something strange. All the clocks in the apartment had stopped at exactly a few minutes before 8 o'clock. She brushed it off as a coincidence. While Susanna was showering, the doorbell rang. It was Eva, who introduced herself as someone who had met Susanna a few times before. Eva explained that their grandmothers had been close friends. For the past 4 months, Eva had been visiting Pilar regularly, helping her with household chores and taking her for walks in the park. She even had a key to Pilar's apartment, which is how she was able to enter. Eva hadn't been able to contact Pilar for days and, concerned, decided to visit. Susanna explained Pilar's condition, and Eva expressed her condolences, saying that Pilar had seemed fine when they spoke on the phone last week. Eva shared that her own grandmother had passed away from illness. Because of her closeness with Pilar, Eva knew a lot about Susanna from Pilar's stories and recognized her from magazine covers and advertisements. After chatting for a while, Eva left, and Susanna thanked her for taking care of Pilar so often. After that, Susanna searched for elderly care services, but all of them refused because Pilar's condition required special care. Fortunately, one foundation agreed to help, and a caregiver was scheduled to come to Pilar's apartment in 2 days. In the meantime, Susanna continued taking care of her grandmother, closing her bedroom window before going to sleep and promising her boss, Elvira, that she would return to work in Paris as soon as possible. However, not long after, Susanna heard noises coming from the apartment hallway. When she went to check, she found Pilar talking to someone in the living room, even though no one was there. The room's light suddenly went out, but Susanna, curious, stepped inside. Just as she entered, the door slammed shut. Rushing to Pilar's bedroom, Susanna found her grandmother lying on the bed, staring at the window, which was inexplicably open again. After locking the window once more, Susanna returned to her room, only to hear Pilar's door creak open again. Despite her fear, Susanna checked on her grandmother and saw Pilar convulsing, with veins bulging all over her body. Panicked, Susanna called an ambulance, but before she could explain the situation, Pilar appeared to have returned to normal, sleeping peacefully, with no sign of the veins. Disturbed by the strange incident, Susanna stayed up all night, unable to sleep, and decided to watch TV to keep the silence at bay. The next morning, Susanna checked on Pilar, who was still sound asleep. Susanna then remembered a childhood diary she had hidden under the mattress, locked, with the key tucked behind a poster. Unlocking the diary, she reminisced about her childhood memories, particularly her deep affection for Pilar. She recalled their shared birthday on March 22nd, when Susanna turned 8, and Pilar invited her friend Julita, who brought her granddaughter Eva, the same age as Susanna. On that day, Susanna and Eva were given a strange red drink that tasted odd but delicious. Pilar also cut Susanna's hair for some unknown reason. After birthday party, Susanna had a terrifying dream about her grandmother. After feeding Pilar, Susanna noticed an old photo of Pilar with Eva, looking very close. Feeling restless, she smoked a cigarette outside and saw an advertisement from the perfume company she worked for, now featuring a different model. Frustrated, she called Elvira and promised to return to Paris soon, as Pilar's caregiver was arriving the next day. When Susanna returned to the apartment, she discovered that Pilar was missing. Panicked, she searched the streets, wandering through the neighborhood until nightfall, but there was no sign of her grandmother. Exhausted and anxious, Susanna returned to the apartment and called the police to report a missing person. Suddenly, Pilar appeared, sitting silently at the front door. Susanna asked where she had been, but Pilar, as usual, said nothing and didn't even respond. Growing increasingly irritated, Susanna struggled to feed her grandmother, who refused to open her mouth. Pilar even laughed mockingly at Susanna when she became frustrated after getting spat on. After laying her grandmother on the bed, Susanna went straight to sleep. However, she noticed flickering lights coming from outside her room. Curious, she investigated the source, which grew brighter and brighter. Suddenly, something strange happened. All her hair turned white, Her teeth began falling out and her body aged rapidly. Just as she began to panic, Susanna woke up. It was another nightmare, but this time she found herself in her grandmother's bed and screamed in hysteria, while Pilar was sleeping peacefully in her own room. The next morning, the caregiver arrived as scheduled, greeting Pilar warmly. After a brief introduction, the caregiver left, explaining that she would begin working the next day at 11 a.m., allowing Susanna to leave for Paris later that afternoon. Relieved that she could finally return to work and stop worrying about her grandmother, Susanna stepped out for some fresh air. To her horror, Susanna saw Pilar standing by the window, muttering incomprehensibly, with her hands moving strangely, as though casting a spell. The moment Pilar finished, Susanna witnessed the caregiver being fatally hit by a car. Terrified, Susanna didn't return to the apartment that night. Instead, she isolated herself at a ramen shop and later rested at a bus stop. Remembering the brochure for a nursing home that the doctor had recommended, Susanna made up her mind. The next morning, she returned to the apartment, finding Pilar still standing by the window, staring out. Without delay, Susanna packed Pilar's belongings and brought her to the nursing home. Tearfully, she apologized, explaining that she had no other choice but to leave her there. Back at the apartment, Susanna recorded a voice message for Elvira, letting her know that she would return to Paris that evening. However, while preparing a meal, she discovered maggots crawling inside her food. At the same time, a breaking news report aired on TV, revealing that the nursing home had caught fire. The flames, reportedly caused by a flying sofa, had spread rapidly, but fortunately there were no casualties. Susanna was shocked by the news, especially when she turned around to see Pilar standing in the apartment, smiling at her. After witnessing the caregiver's accident, the fire at the nursing home, and the many other bizarre occurrences, Susanna became convinced that her grandmother possessed supernatural powers, that Pilar was a witch. Knowing she couldn't escape her grandmother's influence, Susanna made a desperate decision. That night, she laced Pilar's dinner with poison. As Susanna fed her a few spoonfuls, Pilar began gasping for air and eventually passed away. Not long after, Susanna's phone alarm rang, signaling that it was midnight on March 22nd, their shared birthday. Susanna called the police to report that her grandmother had just passed away from choking and requested an ambulance. Moments later, she noticed something unsettling. The photo of Pilar and Eva had changed. Instead of Pilar, it now showed Susanna with Eva. Suddenly, the house phone rang, and it was Eva on the line. To Susanna's shock, Eva addressed her as Pilar. Susanna then noticed maggots crawling over Pilar's food and spilling from her mouth. The power abruptly went out, and Susanna heard the sound of a lighter being struck. As she cautiously approached a glowing room, she found a lit candle placed in front of the large painting of Pilar as a young woman. Susanna tried to extinguish the candle, but no matter what she did, the flame wouldn't go out. It eventually vanished on its own, revealing a secret compartment in the table beneath the painting. Inside, Susanna discovered a photo of herself as a child, surrounded by strands of her hair cut by Pilar years ago. At this point, it became clear that Pilar and her friend Julita had likely made a pact with the devil. They performed a ritual to ensure their immortality by transferring their souls into their granddaughters' bodies on their shared birthdays. Just as Julita had possessed Eva's body, Pilar now planned to do the same to Susanna. This explained why Pilar had been so thrilled to see her friend alive in a youthful, vibrant form earlier in the film. Terrified, Susanna hid in the bathroom, but suddenly cracks appeared on the wall, spreading until they shattered the mirror. Then, the figure of Pilar emerged, reaching out her hand to grab Susanna. Susanna tried to escape from the apartment, but Pilar's power stopped her. All the clocks in the apartment began to chime, and suddenly Susanna couldn't move her body, as it was controlled by Pilar, who slammed her to the floor. Pilar slowly approached her, chanting and performing strange hand movements that forced Susanna to open her mouth. Susanna became weaker and weaker until her body finally succumbed. After a while, Pilar, who now fully possessed Susanna's body, woke up, and the clocks in the apartment had returned to normal. Pilar approached her former body and said, "My body is yours, and your heart is mine." In the film's final scene, Pilar, now in Susanna's youthful body and fully naked, admired the large painting in her apartment. The portrait had changed to reflect her new form, showing herself as Susanna. Shortly afterward, Eva arrived, marveling at Pilar's new body, and their reunion ended the film. And that's it for the story series of this film. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to support this channel by subscribe, like and share. See you in the next video. Goodbye.